When dealing in the commercial world, sometimes you get into these things called trade fixtures. A trade fixture is a personal property that may be attached in such a manner that it becomes real. I wonder if we could think of an example of a trade fixture that might have be personal attached in such a manner that it looks real. Ah, the whiteboard. I did that one day, and one of the girl in the back finally goes, "We get to knock that off." This whiteboard is a trade fixture. It's used in the course of my business. It's attached in such a manner that it now looks permanent. The big difference is this. It's my personal property attached to someone else's real property. Okay? So the landlord owns this, and for those of you at home, I'm using finger quotes, house, but the board is mine. So it's two different owners. Whereas a fixture in the house, your ceiling fan, your house. Trade fixtures used in business, and typically it's two different people. Landlord's house or building, tenant's personal property. All right? So that's a trade fixture. For you old people, remember Walden's books had built-in bookshelves, trade fixtures, deli tables. Anybody ever seen a Pizza Hut where they cement the pizza oven into the floor so it doesn't move? It's a true story. They do that. They pour the cement around the pizza oven so it won't move. That would be a trade fixture, okay? If I fail to remove my personal property as the tenant when my lease expires, it will actually convert to the landlord's real property. What's that called again? Going from personal to real? I'll wait. Annexation, right? In this particular case, it's also changing owners. It's called constructive annexation. Constructive annexation. Not only is it changing types from personal to real, it's changing owners. Sometimes you hear it called accession. The book says accession. They're on page 24, but it's called constructive annexation. They have to be attached or have to be removed before my lease expires. Anybody ever heard of Skyline Properties? Brady's a friend of mine that owns Skyline Properties. He's got like a warehouse of stuff that people have left because their leases expired and they moved out and left, you know, cutting supplies and bars and chairs and desks and tables and all that kind of stuff. So it switches from personal to real and tenant to landlord. Constructive annexation. And like I said, the big difference is trade fixtures are usually different people, whereas my fixture at home is my ceiling fan, my house. Trade fixtures, my whiteboard, their property. Okay? Now, real estate has value. There are 7 qualities to real estate that give it value. 4 of them are an economic characteristic, and 3 are a physical characteristic. The first economic characteristic is scarcity. Scarcity. The less type of a property there are, probably the more value it has. There are 372 lots that sit on Geist Reservoir. When one of them goes for sale, never sells at a discount. Why? Because there's only 372 lots in the entire world that sit on that lake. Very scarce. Contrast that with farmland. How many millions of acres of farmland are there in the United States? Very populous, so very low value. $3,000, $8,000. $900,000 on Geist because of the scarcity of it. That gives value to a property. The improvements. What's an improvement? Any man-made item. So land with man-made items on it usually are worth more than vacant land. Hint, hint. You buy an acre with a building on it, probably going to pay more than a vacant acre because the improvements give value. I went to Texas A&M and there were 12 of us in our class. One of the guys kept saying, my daddy owns like 500 acres. And Amy Baker said, my daddy only owns 1 acre. And they're like, oh, poor Amy. She goes, yeah, it's downtown Dallas. Her dad was the president of that insurance company that owned that building in Dallas. So buildings tend to give more value than vacant land. All right? The permanence of investment. Permanence of investment means land will always be worth more in the future than it is today. In the long run. You got to look at that in the long run. You can't say, well, my house was 100 grand last year and today it's dropped to 98. Yeah, I understand there are some small fluctuations, but look at the value of land in 1920 versus the value of land in 2020. Land will always be worth more money. Will always go up. It's a permanent of investment. The last one is this thing called situs, or area preference, another Greek word, or Latin, or non-English, I don't know. There's actually a real estate company here in Indianapolis called Situs Realty, which means location. There are some areas, for whatever reason, are worth more than neighboring areas. We talked about a couple of them the other day. Broad Ripple. Broad Ripple's worth about 1.5 times more than the house sitting somewhere else. Why? Who knows? I have no idea. But you go to a house in Broad Ripple, and you can't do this, because we talked about it yesterday, but if you could, if I could move that house anywhere else, it'd be worth about 2/3 of that value. But because it's sitting in Broad Ripple, there's an area preference. The young millennials want to be there. It's got the party mode, what art, craft, deco kind of stuff. Who knows why? Woodruff Place, another one. Center Grove, starting to become that way. They're going to pay more for that property because of where it's sitting than if it were sitting somewhere else. It's an area preference. People want to be in Broad Ripple. You know. There are 3 physical characteristics. You can't move land. We already talked about that. It's immobile. Where it sits is where it sits. And that will cause value. If it's sitting in the middle of Iowa, probably not really valuable. Iowa's so flat, you can watch a dog run away for 3 days there. All right? But is that land sitting on Geist? More valuable. Land is also indestructible. Dig a hole in it, but now you own the hole. You can't dig it up and move it somewhere else. And it's unique. There's that word I was telling you about, non-homogeneity. The book and the test loves that word. They can't just say unique. They love non-homogeneity. No 2 pieces of land are the same, and I will prove that to you in chapter 6. And because of that, things change. Values change. Are you on the right side of the railroad track, or are you one of those people from the wrong side of the railroad track? All right? I don't know, that was a big thing in Greenfield where I grew up. Can't be from the east end. That's the wrong side of the railroad track. Can't play with them. I know their parents. Greenfield was like 12,000 people when I grew up, so. All the good old days. When your friend's mother used to whip you and spank you and send you home, and then your mom used to beat you. It's amazing. They didn't have cell phones then, but it still beat you back home. The bad news still beat you back home. Yeah. Brent McLaren's mom used to beat us all the time, send us home. And before I could run 3 blocks, I got home, Mom was already waiting at the door. Didn't even have cell phones. I don't know. Maybe it's just because my mom used to beat me every day. I don't know. You guys are hanging out at the bank too much. Took me a long time to realize I was always afraid of my dad growing up. I didn't realize till I was about 17 that my dad was just a hitman. Mom was the boss because she would just say, you know, go beat your son, and Dad was like, okay. He used to kiss me on the cheek, say this is going to hurt you more than me, but you must have done something. My dad was, though, he was like mean. He was like, get out in the middle of the road, let me get the car out, I'll show you. Yeah. No, my dad was a cop. And I tell stories, and people don't believe me. They don't put it on record. Dad used bullwhips. My brother and I used to hurt each other trying to get out of the room when Dad was coming. Because Mom would say, Jimmy! And all of a sudden you'd hear down the hallway steps, and we would climb over each other just trying to get out of the room. You know, it wasn't bad. Any practicing attorneys in here? I always ask. I already did. But no. Make sure you guys don't practice law. The Indiana Bar Association loves to come after people that practice law. So get used to saying, I'm not a practicing attorney, but I did sleep on a Holiday Inn Express last night. But here's what I think. All right? So you will have to know zoning law, agency law, environmental law, brokerage law, but you can't practice law. Make sure that you are aware of that. A lot of times when people will ask you, hey, I got this so-and-so where the neighbor is encroaching on my property, what do I do? Well, I'm not a practicing attorney, but here's what I think. Or I think we should seek out an attorney. Even though you are the closest thing that most buyers and sellers will get to an attorney, because in Indiana we don't use attorneys. All right? New York's different. New York, we're marketing agents. As soon as the purchase agreement comes in, they hand it to an attorney, they negotiate. We don't do that here. All right? So make sure that you don't end up writing contracts. You can't write a contract. You're not a practicing attorney. But you can say, well, here's what I think or what I've had, but I'm not an attorney. We might want to check that out. That's always just a thing I want to stress. I'm not, I was partners for a while in the school here with a guy that was a practicing attorney. I'm not, he is. And Jeff used to tell people all the time, this is not legal advice, this is real estate advice. Even though he was a practicing attorney, he would tell people, don't take this as legal advice. This is a real estate advice to you. Now, occasionally he would say, okay, this is legal and then we can do this. He could do that, I can't. All right? We do have license law that you will have to know. We will go over license law. All 50 states has license law. Every state's license law is different. A lot of states are very similar. Florida is very similar to us. All right? Nevada's completely weird. California is way out in left field with their license law. All right? One of the license laws says you have to go to school 90 hours. That's what you guys are doing. Montana is like 12 hours, you know, because nobody wants to live in Montana. There's always one weirdo. A buddy of mine lives in Manhattan, Montana, and he owns the convenience store and the gas station. And when we would go to conferences, he would tell people all the time, I own a block in Manhattan, Montana. And you can see the people are like, oh. Because I own a city block in Manhattan, Montana. His name was Jesse Riveras. Owned the convenience store and the gas station. Yeah. So please do not practice law. guess I probably should have moved there's the three. Immobility and destruction and uniqueness. Contract law, general law, all kinds of stuff. We don't write contracts. You can't write a contract. Even though all the time you hear agents go, well, I got to go home and write a contract tonight. Actually, we're filling in 37 blanks in our pre-printed form. All right? And the Indiana Bar Association sued the Indiana Association of Realtors like in '64 because they said we were practicing law. And the Indiana Supreme Court came back and said, no, in fact, we are not practicing law because we are filling in contracts. We're filling in pre-printed forms with name, generic stuff, price, things like that. You cannot write a contract. Contract law is the most argued law there is. What did you say? What did he argue? Here's one that Jeff used to love to show all the time. So the sentence of the board says, let's eat, comma, grandma. That's the sentence, right? That's an invitation to your grandmother. Let's eat, grandma. Now watch this. That's a whole different statement when you take the comma out. Let's eat, grandma. One's premeditated murder, the other's an invitation to dinner. And all you changed was a comma. We cannot write contract. What did you say? Well, I said this. That's not what you said. Well, that's what I meant, but that's not what you wrote. Okay? So we've got to be careful not to practice law. All right? Any questions about this chapter? This was a relatively short chapter, chapter 2. Tomorrow's fair housing. It's a good chapter. I love having a big class. We get a lot of discussion. But when we hit chapter 4 is when we start getting into the good stuff. These first couple chapters are words and definitions to get you a base of where we're going. Federal law. Wouldn't miss tomorrow if I were you. Very important. It's federal law. You could literally lose your license over violating the fair housing. All right? Any questions? All right. Good for the day.